Hi, I'm Bob Gimlin. This video contains 3 paranormal encounters I've accumulated over the years. First, the nightly visitors. Bob. My experience began when I married my wife, and we bought our first and only home. We had spent our whole lives in New York City, got married, and moved to the country. I would never call it the country now, but coming from Manhattan, it might as well have been Alaska. I fell in love with the new house, so did my wife. She said it was just like the house she had imagined since she was a little girl growing up in the city, which I thought was sweet. She said she used to have dreams of a house with identical brick walls and window planters, but I'm not sure if that's relevant to my story or not. It is a 2-story brick house. It has a fireplace on both floors. I initially liked the house because it felt so secure, like a little fortress of isolation, compared to our old apartment with paper-thin walls. I still had to go to the city off and on, and a 2-hour drive was actually kind of nice, because work, friends, and family were close, but not too close, if you know what I mean. The first thing that happened, and trust me, it was hard to ignore, is that around 1 a.m., we heard the loudest, hardest bangs. I can't really describe it much more than that. They were loud, and heavy enough to wake both of us. From the second floor, we could hear dishes rattling in the cupboard from the kitchen. You could feel the whole house shake, bang, 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 like the frame of the house was being battered, or like the foundations were being struck with sledgehammers. It would last for less than 10 minutes. More than once, we actually got out of the house to see if it was happening everywhere, but it wasn't. Even from the front lawn, I could hear the house booming. The window panes rattled. This would happen twice a month, maybe. We called a home inspector, a plumber, and even an engineer who was a buddy of mine. His job was moving antique buildings, so he knew a lot about this sort of thing. We explained the situation, but didn't get any answers. The home inspector was some kind of wise guy. He was the same guy who looked at the house before we closed on it. He gave a thorough look around and said, "Nope, no sign of grenades going off in the crawl space." The banging had happened about 20 times since then. 2 or 3 times a month, maybe. I remember it was a Sunday morning in March. I was sleeping in. The wife calls anything past 6:45 sleeping in, of course. So this one morning, she bursts into the bedroom screaming at me and tries to climb under me. She's screaming, the kitchen, tell me you did this, why did you do this? Do you think this is funny? Is this funny to you? Is this how you get your jollies?" I remember being excited. I walked downstairs with her behind me, and witnessed the most intensely creepy thing I have ever seen. On the kitchen table sat a display of some kind. A model, or design. I don't know what you want to call it. The first layer was rectangular gray bars. I thought they were made of clay at first. Then the second layer was 4 candles, pushed into the bars of clay, wick side down. The base of the candles were sticking up, and candlestick holders were inserted into the base of the candles. Then on top of the base of the candlesticks sat a cutting board, with one final clay briquette thing on the top. All of the items used to construct this terrible thing came from a box in the living room. The box was full of wedding presents, and my wife hadn't unpacked it yet because she had yet to approve of a suitable plate containment apparatus. The tape was ripped off the box, but it was still folded shut by the overlapping corners. The box hadn't moved. I have no idea how this setup was balanced the way it was. As gently as I could, I tried to take the clay off the top plate, and the whole thing collapsed. I'm not exaggerating. It was so fragile that sneezing from 2 feet probably would have done it. The clay was the color of farm-fresh eggs. Then I realized it wasn't clay at all, because I smelled my fingers and it reminded me of the movie theaters. It was butter, but I don't know how. It was crispy, almost like it had been fried. But instead of melting, it felt like hardened foam sealant. I don't know how it kept its shape. If you tapped it with a knife, it sounded like a churro. Crispy and brittle. I told my wife it was butter, and she disagreed. Then she opened the fridge and started screaming, "It was in the fridge, it went into the fridge." She threw every scrap of food away from that fridge, even the beer. It took me several hours, but I actually managed to recreate the structure, though a glue gun was necessary for my recreation. I took a few Polaroid photos of it, but lost them one night on the boat. I saved the butter in the freezer, but the wife accidentally threw it away almost immediately. We never found the butter's paper wrapping. I wonder if it somehow melted into the butter, giving it that crispy texture. We were deeply disturbed by this, of course. One of the reasons I liked the house so much was that it was built like a little fortress. Both doors were solid, with physical and key locks. The windows were locked, and the screens weren't messed with. I'm very confident that nothing came in from outside, which of course was no comfort at all. I did a lot of research. This was before research was as easy as it is today. Everything I read indicated poltergeist. It literally means noisy ghost. According to the literature, poltergeists aren't really ghosts. They are typically regarded as unintentional or subconscious physical manifestations from a living person, but we'd never had paranormal experiences before moving into the house. I'm not saying at all it was a poltergeist, but that is what the books indicated. My wife wanted to go see a priest about this. She's very Catholic, but I dragged my feet. I was not happy about it, and she wouldn't let me wait in the car. After the service ended, we waited for people to shuffle out. My wife introduced herself and talked about how we just moved here and how the church is so beautiful, what a lovely service, yada yada. And then she segued right into, we've been having some really weird things going on in the house. But the priest cut her off. He said he'd be happy to do a blessing, but it's best to know what we're dealing with first. Very casually, he went into a back room and came back with a phone number and a name. I'm not kidding. The priest gave us a phone number for a psychic. He didn't miss a beat. He acted like this happens twice a day. I wasn't expecting that. The psychic came over about a month later. I remember it was June 5th, because it was the day after our anniversary. And my wife was having a cleaning fit, because of course the psychic is going to be judgmental about the cleanliness of surfaces. It was one of the more ridiculous days of my life. She had to be at least 80. She was 4 feet tall. There was something nun-like about her. I went to an all-boys Catholic high school, so I have a long, rich history with nuns, and there was something very nun-like about her. Actually, maybe more like an anti-nun. Like when two ideologies are so opposite each other that they begin to share behaviors. I felt bad because she had a hard time getting around. She basically crawled up our staircase. I wanted to try and help her, but she wanted us to wait outside. It was funny too because her son was waiting in the car. He never got out, never really moved. We stared at him, wondering if we should ask if he wanted water or something. Not that we could go in our house. I was feeling stupid, standing on my porch while this tiny lady crawled around my house. In fact, I made a mental note to check on some valuables we didn't think to put away. Wouldn't that have been something? Paying a psychic to rob me? But then I couldn't help but notice. She began to bang the floor with her cane, to an eerily similar pattern of the nightly sounds we heard. Of course, it wasn't nearly as loud, but it was undeniably identical in pattern. We hadn't told her anything about what was going on in the house, nor had we given the priest any details, so I was fascinated at how she was mimicking the beat of the banging. After 45 minutes, she comes outside. She tells us that in 50 years of doing this, she had never experienced anything like this before. She said, and this I believe is exactly what she said, when they come for a person, when they have selected a person, they don't stop coming for that person after said person dies. They, in this particular case, being those from another planet, extraterrestrials, little green men, but they aren't green, and they're not little. They don't look like they mean well, and they come and go on spaceships. The year was 1989, and let me tell you that if she wasn't psychic one way, she was in another, because she said the only thing that could have seriously freaked me out. I didn't like that at all. Not one little bit. Even Alf made me uncomfortable. Then she told us we owed her $200. My wife wrote out the check, in total shock. It was like she had forgotten how to write. Then the psychic limped back to her car. My wife asked what we're supposed to do. The psychic turned around and said, "They're not here for you, so no need to fret." Then she got into her car and was gone just like that. That was enough for me to come back to the church. And nothing unusual has occurred in the house since then. The house has a different feel since we fortified ourselves. It's okay if you roll your eyes at that. I certainly would have when I was your age. I guess the psychic's explanation really did a number on me. I became a lot less skeptical and a lot more accepting of the fact that more goes on than can be seen, and I've been a lot happier in general since I realized that fact. I'm not even necessarily saying that I believe the psychic. I don't know if it was ghosts, aliens, alien ghosts, or ghost aliens, but I do know that something did this. Something was there, and that something doesn't seem to like God. Which to me begs the question, why would religion deter the visitors? Well, a lot of junk I've watched on television claims that aliens may think they are gods. Our gods, at least. And since they aren't, that may make them demons. Or at least functionally demons. Absolutely, you can share my experience. If anyone else out there is having trouble like mine, my advice should be obvious. Have faith in God. The world brightens almost immediately. I think there is powerful and active evil in this world, and it is a great deception that we are alone against it, and an even greater deception that it doesn't exist. The lights and the creature. Bob, you should come to New Mexico sometime. Or don't, depending on your constitution. I live near Santa Fe, and I promise you, crazy stuff here happens all the time. I used to go camping out east, when I lived near Los Alamos. All sorts of weird stuff happened. This was in the 80s and 90s. I would see lights in the forest. I wouldn't exactly call them your typical orb, as they were actually more like rods. They reminded me of lightsabers. I'd guess they were 3 to 5 feet long. They were green with a tinge of blue, or maybe blue with a tinge of green. I believe they had some sort of consciousness, or awareness, or they were being controlled by someone, because they would seem to come straight at my camp, and then zag to circle the perimeter. They were bright enough to see far off in the distance, but you can't because of all the trees. This was not a 1 or 2 time experience. I saw them hundreds of times. And yes, I actually did get them on tape, but it just looks like glow sticks, flickering behind branches in the dark. I'm still happy I got them on tape, but unless you've seen it in person, the tapes won't convince anyone. If I ever figure out how to get it on the computer, I can show you them. My best buddy is big into elk hunting. He's all hardcore. He's a vet. He never believed me about the crazy stuff that happens out there. One day he calls me up and says he needs to talk. He told me he saw an unknown creature on a ridgeline, from a few ridges over. I know this is out there, but this is what he said. He saw a 4-legged gray creature, the size of a grizzly bear, with skin like a rhinoceros. It was low to the ground. It had a smooth head and was holding what was either a dog or coyote in its mouth. Its shoulders to its elbows were level to the ground, and its elbows were bent at a right angle. Its arms and legs didn't go backwards like a normal animal. It was very square, so he said it kind of scuttled like a bug. He couldn't tell when he first saw it, but he hiked over, and the ridge it crawled over was too steep for him to get to. While he was scoping out a path, he heard some coyotes go crazy, so he hoofed it out of there. Before this sighting, he wouldn't even talk to me about the unexplained stuff. He said it was for stupid people, and that I get too excited. But after his sighting, he is obsessed with the skinwalker legends and UFO stuff. This is Navajo land, after all. This region is covered with caves, and there have been massive earth-moving projects in the area. I think there are enormous underground bases here. I wonder if maybe some special projects escaped through natural caves, and they have not been captured, or maybe even allowed to come and go as they please. If you saw half the stuff we've seen, nothing seems too crazy. Shadow people. Bob, I'm reaching out to you today to ask if you've ever had anyone talk to you about shadow people, or if you have gained some insight about them in your travels. I used to have dreams, or nightmares about them. I actually don't remember having the dreams, or exactly how old I was when I had them, or even if I was totally asleep. But I remember hyper-realistic nightmares about them from when I was very young. Basically in the nightmares, I'm hiding under the covers, while people, totally 3-dimensional, but as dark as total darkness, are walking around my bedroom. They're speaking in hushed tones, as if they were trying to be quiet. I remember hoping they wouldn't notice me, or do anything to me if they thought I was asleep. For a long time, I thought they were just dreams. They are also the reason to this day I can't fall asleep without background noise of some kind. But when I was 20, I'm 31 now, I moved into my first apartment. I hadn't lived there for more than a week. I was carrying my laundry through the basement to the communal laundry room when I was suddenly overcome with the most intense feeling of fear. I almost felt stunned. The basement was dark, and I could tell something was behind me. Against my better judgment, I turned my head to see a shadow man, just like from my dreams. I was holding my laundry staring at it. It's maybe 20 feet away on the other side of the room, by the storage lockers. Then it cocks its head at me, and I just keep walking. Since then, I have had similar sightings a couple dozen times. I can usually feel when they're around, and I take precautions accordingly. The darker it is, the more confident they are. The brighter it is, the less confident they are. I'm so thankful to have a sympathetic girlfriend. One night, different apartment, I saw one walk right across the bathroom doorway as I was brushing my teeth. It was looking at me, though it's hard to see exactly where their faces are pointing. It's best not to act alarmed, so I finished brushing my teeth and walked out to the living room. My girlfriend asks if it feels strange in here, and tells me that she's totally freaked out for no reason. I laughed and said it was time to watch Super Troopers, and turn all the lights on until we fall asleep. After this, I told her about the shadow people, and she gets it. She's never seen them, but she gets it. So I was just wondering if you have had any insights into this phenomena. My advice to anyone struggling with this is not to underestimate the power of lights, laughter, company, and comedy. I honestly think they feed on fear and anxiety. Don't let them have it. Anyway, like and subscribe for more soon-to-come content. And as always, thanks an awful lot for listening, and perhaps considering.